Hello and welcome to this two-part series on the Indo-Pak conflict over Kargil and the adjoining heights. And we will bring to you the details of how the conflict was initiated by Pakistan and how India responded. What led to it in the very first place? You see, Kargil is a town in the northern reaches of the state of Jammu Kashmir, and now it is part of Ladakh. But in 1999, it was all part of Jammu Kashmir. And ahead of Kargil, on those heights of the Himalayas, were various high posts that were regularly, very heavily filled with snow in the winter months. And Indian and Pakistani troops had an arrangement since the 1972 Suchetgarh Agreement, which defined the line of control. That was an extension of the earlier ceasefire line of 1948-49. And the agreement was that in severe winter, both sides will pull their troops back, and as the summers would set in around April, May, troops would go back to those heights they held all along the line of control which defined the reaches of India and Pakistan's claim lines on Jammu Kashmir. So there were many posts there, and some of them were very, very hard to maintain and to continue to occupy in winter months. Some of them now are etched in public memory, whether it was Tololing, whether it was Tiger Hill, and so many others. But there was a Pakistan Army chief, General Musharraf, who in 1998-99, after Pakistan followed India with nuclear tests, decided to put together a plan to occupy those heights when India would vacate them in the winter months, and then present India with a fait accompli. Now, Musharraf's plan was similar to a plan that existed in the Pakistani Army headquarters, and these plans have actually, in the past, records show, been run through General Zia, who was Army Chief and also President, and later Prime Minister Bhutto. And in both cases, they were dismissed as rather dangerous, escalatory, and one, if Pakistan followed them up with, would lead to a full-fledged conflict between India and Pakistan. The fear in 1988-99 was even higher when Pakistan had gone fully nuclear. So Musharraf discreetly began to implement this game plan that was being supported by 2-3 other officers in the Pakistani military hierarchy, the GOC-10 Corps, the FCNA area commander, that is a general officer, and of course his vice chief or chief of general staff. This plan essentially involved Pakistan pushing in irregulars backed by the regular army. So there were people dressed in shalwar kameez. These were those who looked like irregulars but largely were part of Pakistan's paramilitary force, the Northern Light Infantry, which is all over the northern areas of Gilgit-Baltistan, and people recruited from those areas who were adept at mountain warfare. Also, regular army troops were pushed up. Musharraf apparently, when the build-up took place, claims to have visited one or two of those posts on the LOC, while India under Prime Minister Vajpayee was toying with a full-time peace arrangement with Pakistan. So, despite him and others being cautioned by political leaders that this was too dangerous and escalatory, Musharraf began to unfold the plan to take over the heights around Kargil and present India with a fait accompli, which means if you have troops dominating those heights, then using them for observation and artillery fire, you could dominate the road that ran from the Srinagar Valley area via the passes onto Kargil and beyond into Leh Ladakh, the main maintenance line for Indian troops positioned in Leh and beyond that in Siachen. So cut that off and you then get India to the negotiating table with Pakistan holding the cards to their advantage. The other factor that was driving the Pakistan army was also to give India a resounding reply for the humiliation that was inflicted on them in the 1971 war and their surrender thereafter. But what Pakistan had begun to do was by November 1998, when the snowfall was high, airlift troops and even move up troops to occupy those posts and build some temporary posts. They were not full-fledged bunkers, but they came to be known as sangars. These were to provide fairly well-protected defensive positions for Pakistan army to be prepared for India to respond, which they knew eventually India would do. So the records show that there was a person called Lieutenant General Mahmood Ahmed who approached the Pakistan Army's Vice Chief, that is Lieutenant General Muhammad Aziz, he was known as Chief of General Staff, and to get him a meeting with General Musharraf along with General Javed Hussain, who was commander of the FCNA area, that is the northern areas of Pakistan, and the NLI was under him, to unfold this plan to dominate the Kargil Dras region through occupation of heights. Musharraf jumped at it because he had a personal agenda to settle. Between 1985 and 1987, Musharraf, as a brigade commander in the Siachen theatre, tried desperately to dislodge Indian troops from the heights they had occupied along Saltoro Ridge. The Saltoro Ridge is a high mountain range that guards the Siachen Glacier. So troops are normally not by even India deployed on the Siachen Glacier, though Indian troops clearly control the Siachen Glacier, but it is the Saltoro Ridge that provides India the defense against any Pakistani intrusion. Pakistan tried like hell under Musharraf, but at least on 2 to 3 occasions he failed. So there was a bee in his bonnet to teach India a lesson, take over these heights, and then eventually lay claim to the Siachen Glacier by isolating Indian troops, because their logistic lines would be cut by the domination of this highway that came from the valley via Kargil Dras area into Leh Ladakh, and that was the supply lines even to Siachen. So the operation was launched. Now it is still a debatable point whether Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif of Pakistan was on board. You see, Sharif has a problem with English language. All the briefings were done in English language. So it is said by historians that he didn't capture the details of the operational planning, and therefore in principle gave a go-ahead as long as it would not escalate to unmanageable levels. The story was to turn out differently. Secondly, there was another area, and the Pakistan army in itself was not brought on board. So it was Musharraf with these 3 other generals who was planning this operation. Pakistan army was only brought on board in March 1999. This is 4 months after the intrusions had taken place from November 98. The Pakistani Air Force once presented with this plan, expressed skepticism. They said, we are not going to be able to support your military operations because we don't have aircrafts that fly and bomb targets accurately beyond 15,000 feet height. And many of these heights were above 15,000 feet. Secondly, the Pakistan Navy was completely not on board. And most interestingly, the ISI was also not kept informed by Musharraf in the earlier stages, even though General Musharraf and his cronies had planned to present this operation as a Mujahideen operation on those icy heights. Logically, anybody who understands insurgencies would question, why would Mujahideen occupy those isolated icy heights around Kargil There are no population there. There are no strategic communication centers. There are no townships to occupy. So what are the Mujahideen going to do on those icy heights? Guerrillas as a force are designed to fight by playing the game of hide and seek. They are not designed to fight conventional battles entrenched inside their trenches as regular troops are. And neither can guerrillas resist a full-fledged military attack with conventional troops backed by artillery fire and even air force. They're not designed for that, but nobody questioned it. Many in Indian press bought this Pakistani narrative hook, line and sinker, and the Pakistani press was going hammer and tongs by showing what a great success their Mujahideen had achieved by occupying those heights. When it became known to India, they were all there. The Indian political establishment and the military took a while to respond, partly because it wasn't very clear to them where all the Pakistanis had deployed troops, and partly because they were worried about non-escalation, more so after Prime Minister Vajpayee had gone to Pakistan earlier in the year in 1999, visited the Minar-e-Pakistan, which is Pakistan's symbol of independence, and announced with Nawaz Sharif a peace arrangement by which India had recognized formally through its Prime Minister Pakistan's independence as a state, and that India and Pakistan, having both tested nuclear weapons in the summer of 1998, had now vowed for peace and security and confidence building measures, not to go in for a conflict. So there were conflicting views in Delhi, and Nawaz Sharif was confused. The Pakistani military, led by Musharraf, gradually was moving in and fortifying itself on the Kargil front. How India pushed them out is the story that we'll tell you in the next episode.